Hey folks, how's it going? I'm here with Marc and Jen, who live on Quadra Island in British Columbia, and today I want to capture their story. I met them a number of years ago now at an introduction to permaculture course because of a common friend, actually, here in Calgary. They're both leaders within the Calgary community, and now they're rapidly becoming leaders within their own community and working towards that. And they took an introduction to permaculture with me, and I've watched their journey over the last few years, and it's been nothing short of completely inspiring to watch a couple put their money where their mouth is, show their two daughters what sustainability means, and actually have gone even further to try and figure out exactly what sustainability means by traveling around the world. So today I want to capture their story, and I think you'll find it really inspiring and learn from how they've transitioned from fairly conventional careers into this new transformation. I mean, they really are transforming their entire life, and they've done it in a very short period of time. So hey, Marc and Jen, how you guys doing?
Morning, Rob.
Pretty good.
So take us back, like what was before the introduction to permaculture, what was the thing that kind of got you guys thinking about all of this stuff? Like what was the trigger for you?
Well, I think both of us have different triggers for sure on how we got here. So maybe we'll each take a moment to give the general overview of how we each got here. For me, I always wanted to get out of city life forever. I've always had a kind of a sense that city life wasn't the most, sustainable way of living. And, I've been saving since I was 16 to be able to, accumulate enough capital to do something. That plan has changed a bunch of times over my life, from just thinking, just go start a little homestead at where our cabin is on the North Shuswap and just, survive off of nothing or whatever. But as time went on as a couple, we became very involved in life in Calgary, very involved in our communities and politically, and trying to spend. We were both highly involved in what we thought was trying to save Alberta from itself. And for me personally, I gave up on Alberta a few years, not that many years ago, but we're finally, I think, when we went for another progressive conservative government, when I saw the time running out and the right decisions weren't being made, and I went, okay, well, Alberta's deciding that it wants to implode, so I got to find a way to get out of here. So that was kind of the instigation. That, and we on a positive note, we wanted to build something where we had our family. I was a realtor in Calgary and doing all sorts of volunteering. Jen had a job as a community developer and we were doing all sorts of volunteering. And we realized, especially when the girls went to school, that the time that we had with our kids wasn't where we wanted it to be. And so we looked at ways of how could we design our lives in a way that we had time for family and we were around it. We could design a life that was designed around family instead of designed around making money. Like life in Calgary, I call it, it's a treadmill. It doesn't matter how fast you run on that treadmill. And Jen and I were, compared to, monetarily, we were kind of sprinting on that treadmill, but still didn't get anywhere. So that was kind of the nut that kind of grew into where we are. That's where it started with me.
Yeah, I think for me, I've always been really concerned about the state of the world, and at a certain point, I had to decide between an environmental type of career and a career in social work, and I chose social work. And I always thought I'd be a city girl, so I was, doing social work, involved in politics, doing a whole bunch of different volunteer things, and hardly ever seeing my kids. Like Marc said, we had a nanny who was just a really great nanny, but in the end, I didn't really want someone else raising my kids. I think we had kids so we could raise them ourselves. And Marc, one day, I don't know, several years into our marriage, told me it was his lifelong dream to have a farm and leave the city. And I'm like, oh, interesting. didn't share that dream. Never envisioned leaving the city, and it took me a while to figure out if I could have the same dream. And basically since then, it's been a process of me trying to figure out, okay, is this really a dream that I could share? And so then we went through the process of our trip and finding permaculture, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I think we both like have a lifelong concern about what's happening to our planet and wanting to do something about it and wanting to make the most of our time that we have here. So it's just been a long process and an ongoing process of figuring out, okay, how can we make a difference and have a life that we can feel good about for us and for our two kids.
Mm-hmm. So you guys were worried about the state of the world, and I'm curious how you stumbled upon permaculture and why that resonated as a solution.
Well, so Mark had said he wanted to farm, and I was trying to figure out, okay, what does that mean? Like, farming is there's so many different ways to farm. It can mean so many different things. So I think I was having a conversation when I was doing Leadership Calgary, which is now the Human Venture Institute. So I was doing that one year, and I was having this conversation with someone there, and she said, well, have you looked at permaculture? And I was like, what's permaculture? Like, I literally had never heard of it. And so I Googled it, and then I think I joined a Facebook group in Calgary, and then saw that the Cabin Fever was coming up, the yearly workshop event. And I said to Mark, hey, this Cabin Fever, we can bring our kids, let's go. It's going to be pretty casual. It was like super cheap. And he's like, no, you go.
I was busy.
I'll spend the day with the girls. You go and then report back. And I'm like, okay. So I went by myself, and I saw you speak, Rob, and I went to a few other workshops. And I think what really struck me about permaculture is for me, it was very familiar in terms of environmental messages, but it was very different in terms of hope. Like, so many talks that you go to or books that you read about the state of the planet are so depressing, and you feel like you can't do anything about it, or you do things like try to change the political system, all those kinds of things, or get a job in the sciences. But this was about how we grow our food, and how we can garden in an urban place, or how we can farm in a rural place, or how we can do social permaculture. Like, there was just so many different options, and I felt like I could do something immediately. Even on living the life we were in the city, I felt like we could garden differently. I could use social permaculture in my work of community development. But the biggest thing was just the hope, and also that I could be part of a community that was really welcoming. I mean, so many communities you need to achieve a certain level of competence before you're really accepted. But permaculture, it felt like no matter where you were at on your journey, you could be a part of a very supportive community and learn as you went. So I came home, and I somehow managed to convince Mark to do that one-day intro with you. And we actually paid for childcare so we could go to that intro. So that was a big deal.
Yeah, I remember that intro actually very vividly. And I remember Mark saying, you mean I can eat beef?
Yeah.
Because for me, the environmental movement was like, if you're going to be environmentalist, you got to not eat meat. And I'm like, what? That's inside. When Jen talked about permaculture, I'm not doing no hippy dippy permaculture bullshit. This is crazy. But she convinced me that Rob was not some hippy dippy moron. So
you'll like Rob.
You'll like Rob.
Give him a
So,
chance.
all right, I'll go there. And right in the beginning, because you talked about a whole system that made sense to me, whereas every other kind of where I had my intro. I knew a little bit about permaculture, but a little bit knowing I knew enough to be dangerous. I thought I knew stuff, but I didn't know anything. And then, yeah, and that intro to permaculture, teaching kind of how whole systems actually operate, possibly. And that hope that Jen was talking about, like, you know, and what I've realized is that I've lost hope in, you know, say in Alberta, and that what I realize is I have a lot of negativity towards our structures that we're currently living, but the hope is outside of those structures, is that to keep, you know, I said I believe firmly that the standard of living that we have currently going on across the Western world, that's hopeless. It's not possible to maintain that. However, there are hopeful ways of going forward on this planet. There's a lot of hope out there, but people whose idea of, you know, keeping the economy going so that nothing changes and that the Western standard of life is sacrosanct, you know, I'm done with the hope in that. I fought that hope for, you know, 30 years of my life, and now it's to look at other places where hope exists, when those structures start to implode. So I find in permaculture there's a lot of hope, but you have to be able to give up your belief that you can jump on a plane and fly anywhere in the world and get food from Mexico and China for basically free, and you can buy your $40,000 car and fill it up with $2 a liter gas. I mean, those are all the hope that's going to be forever. But there is gone. But the hope in a whole bunch of other things in the community driven and whole systems on the land and how to heal and make land productive is very hopeful.
So it almost sounds like there was a death in the sense that it's like it was less about giving up on Alberta and more about giving up on like almost like mourning what was so that you can create space for what could be. Is that right?
I think for me that sounds, I hadn't, you know, processed it that way, but I think that is true, because I mean there was, you know, a 30-year fight from when I was like 16 and joined the first political campaign, where I thought within those structures you could, you know, what's happening now in Alberta to me was perfectly predictable when I was 16 years old. And it's only going to get worse there, and because Alberta made really bad choices for 40 years. And
so given your understanding of the world and the problems that were coming down the pipe, you guys started transitioning and shifting your life energy so that you could surround yourself with this land. Now you guys have a farm, but you started making decisions toward where you saw these pockets of hope essentially, and started transitioning your life in those meaningful ways, which we're going to talk about here in a few seconds.
Yeah, I think we always had hope. I mean, we fought for what we did because we had hope things could be one way, and then we transitioned from, you know, fighting for hope in one domain of life and decided that it would be better. I think with the realization is a lot of those are outside of our control. Things are bigger than we thought they were, and taking into a place and getting to something. I mean, you can't control everything or anything, but you can have more influence on your surroundings when you create a natural environment that you are looking to influence. Like you can decide whether, you know, to plant celery or tomatoes and how to make that. I mean, whether you're using chicken compost or Elaine Ingram inspired compost tea or whatever. I mean, those type of things you can control. Whether you plant a tree or how you go about your daily life that way are all things that you can influence and make actual decisions. Where in the superstructures that we were playing in before, even though we got to play at some pretty high levels, you still don't get to make the changes that you think are possible.
So circle of concern versus circle of influence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when you're always fighting against something, it's not only really negative, but you're fighting and you're saying no to something, but you don't have a chance to put your energy into creating something new. And so I see that all the time in political campaigns. All the energy is in you know, breaking something down, but not in creating something new. And it really is hard to create something new when you're only in office for, you know,
Mm-hmm.
4 or 5 years. It's really hard to fight the system. And I think, so basically we've decided to not totally give up on that, because it's in our blood, you know, but to really focus our energy on the vision and the positive and what we want to create, and let go of the need to always be fighting and saying no.
And how does that feel?
Working on creating something. I just want to make one other point about when we went on our trip that we were woofing in California, and I have always, when I talk to people who want to who are on a similar journey to us, I talk about, or I ask about, well, what about the rest of the world? Like, what do we do about all the things that are wrong? And because I'm still looking for answers. And he said, well, what we need to do is create a parallel system so that when the shit hits the fan and everything goes to pot, we have built up a new system, and we've thought some things through, and we're better prepared than if we're fighting a system and finally that system breaks down like we're predicting, but then we haven't created anything new because we spent all our energy fighting. So I'm like, that makes sense to me. Let's create something new.
So how did that feel for you guys when you stopped in, let's say 90% fight mode to 90% creation mode, or whatever, however you want to split that up? What were some of the kind of physiological shifts that you guys have observed in that transition, and emotional too?
Yeah.
For me, it's interesting. I was exhausted. I mean, when I did my PDC with you, I was totally done. And it's kind of a PTSD thing. There's to come from that amount of energy fighting things takes a lot of your life force, and it's very draining. And coming out of that and getting into a more positive mindset, I'm still in the process of doing it. It's hard. But I think there is a kind of feeling of, I remember, especially as we started off on the trip, like every week there'd be that one breath. Oh, there goes that nerve. That nerve hasn't released in 2 years. And no, there's another, so there's this constant feeling of just releasing and letting go of things, going from, as a realtor, I was on my phone and attached to email and attached to every mobile device 24 hours a day. And that continued for a good number of months onto the trip, where I don't feel the need to do that anymore. So that was a pretty huge transition. I lived on Twitter, and that was part of my role in the political world, and I haven't tweeted in a year.
So you both took sorry, Jen, go ahead.
I mean, it is, when you make that shift, like I kind of say, it's a lot easier to be in opposition than to be in government, because when you're opposition, you're just basically criticizing everything. And it's actually quite easy to criticize compared to having it like, okay, what's our vision and how would we build it? I mean, it's really exciting. We get to have a lot of conversations with people now about, well, what could we do? What could we do together? And how would this work? And it's hard to figure that stuff out, but it's also really energizing and exciting, and you do meet a lot of really great people when you're in that mode. So
totally. So you guys both took permaculture design courses, and then you did an incredible, crazy, completely flipped your life upside down. Tell me about that. What was that like? And what was the journey? Like, where did you guys go, and what did you learn? And what were the goals that you set out on the front end of that?
So yeah, we call it a 180. Yeah, flipping upside down. So when we as we talked about what we wanted to do with our lives way back, we had really wanted to travel, and we couldn't quite figure out how we were going to do it with Marc's business. So we hadn't quite figured it out, but we really wanted to travel with our kids when they were still young, like for a year, live somewhere else or travel around. And then when we decided we wanted to try farming, traveling and working on farms and going to conferences and meeting, some of the people that we've read their books and we wanted to meet them. It was a really great way to learn, but it was also a really great way to imagine our future into being. So like I had always lived in the city. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to live in a rural area, much less farm. And so I thought, well, if we travel and we work on other people's farms that are practicing permaculture or in some way doing something that we could learn from, that would help me imagine what it could be like for us. It also was a great way to create a network of mentors and supports. It was an incredible way to see our country. We traveled in Canada, the States, and a bit of Mexico. So it was a really great chance to see that, especially for our girls to have that experience. And then also we knew that once we got a farm and had animals and probably not much of an income, at least for a while, we wouldn't be doing much traveling. So
Right.
it's like trying to kind of get that out of our system. Although, I don't know, I love traveling. I could almost travel all the time in some ways, whereas I think Mark is much more of a homebody. But I love traveling.
Yeah, so I think maybe to go over what we did. So we left Calgary and we jumped into a 1987 Volkswagen camper van and then did.
And hold on, Mark, you guys sold your house. You didn't just leave Calgary. You didn't just.
Okay.
Yeah.
We sold our house, gave away a bunch of stuff, sold a bunch of stuff, threw what was left into a sea can, throw it in the middle of a friend's field outside of Calgary, jumped into I think you call it 80 or 90 square foot Volkswagen camper van, which we decided was smaller than our old walk-in closet. So that
Definitely.
Yeah, so it was part of like the goals of this trip that you mentioned. Part of it was to find out if we can make the transition from a consumer lifestyle. We've had to cut back our expenses, I think, by over 90% to live this lifestyle. It was to see, can we do it? Are we happy in a world where we can't just go out and buy what we want when we want? Because we can't do that anymore. Like every purchase we make, we generally don't make many. We don't go out for dinner. Everything is done. We had to make big changes, and we had to find out, is that too much for us? Is that something that we're willing to give up on? And like I said, the only thing I really miss of the old lifestyle to new lifestyle is my good scotch. So no more good scotch for me anymore. But that's really the only thing I realized. Nice cars, big house, all those type of things that don't matter when you're out and yesterday I was shoveling goat shit and it was like that was fun, and that I don't need to surround myself with all those the consumer lifestyle that used to be on that treadmill. You're running for that dollar so you can keep on the treadmill. So yeah, so we learned that. So we did kind of the cycle all the way, every province. We did a bunch of states down into Mexico, woofing and volunteering on farms, meeting people, going to conferences, learning about lifestyle to see if we could, go from an urban to a rural with little to no knowledge, and seeing how we could pick up the pieces and make it work. And that was kind of what the trip was about.
And what were the biggest upsides to living with less? Like, how is that, other than the scotch you said you miss, but what are some of the benefits that you've noticed?
Well, when we sold our house and, canceled all of our, bills, basically all the things we had to pay for every month to live that life. Oh, it was such a relief. Like, it was like a huge burden off our shoulders to be debt free. And, we had saved up for a couple of years for our trip. So we had a budget that we stuck with. The trip wasn't actually that expensive. It was just whenever the van repairs. The van repairs and gas were the biggest things. But yeah, no, it was a great relief. And I still I wish we had gotten rid of more stuff before we left Calgary, because now we've brought it with us to Quadra and we're in the process of unpacking. But when we left, I worked right after the time that we left, we just did not have a lot of time to do the purging I would have liked to have done. but I just find having stuff so oppressive right now. Like, it's just, and living in a big house, like now we're in this house again, it's just feels so huge. And yeah, I liked having a small space and little stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like housework, like cleaning a van just takes so little time compared to cleaning a house.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you went from 7 months a year of winter, minus 30 on a regular basis in Alberta, right-wing government, probably a whole bunch of other things on the other end of the bell curve. And then you landed in Quadra, which gets like 2 meters of rain a year, doesn't really have a winter. It's just kind of wet. Left-wing-ish government, like totally opposite. What encouraged you to land there? Like what was it about your trip that got you thinking this is where we need to be, based on all of our values and our vision and what we've seen in the world politically and environmentally, all of your life experience up until this point, plus all these things that you've learned? I mean, another 180 degrees. What is it about the West Coast that kind of got you there?
So I had personally, I think this was a discussion. Jen, we had decided, we were going to go to a coast, and Jen was pushing more East Coast, and I was pushing more West Coast. And so there's a bunch of.
I'm from the coast, so when we got married, I said if we ever leave Calgary, I'd like to move to the coast again, west or east.
So Quadra Island, a couple of things. We happened here kind of by happenstance. The van breakdowns, of which there were many on the trip, always seem to happen for a reason. And we had a van breakdown in Campbell River, basically on Quadra Island. We come to this area to take a cheese making course with David Asher on Cortez Island. Came through Quadra. On that course, we met a bunch of people, got off the ferry, and the van said, "No, you're not leaving this place. You're not done here." So we sent the van off to be repaired, and we ended up we had 3 weeks, of which we spent a large part of it here on the island working for some people that we met, running their property and helping them get their gardens up and running and stuff like that. And in that period of time, came to know the place. Our trip kind of, and even our mini trips prior to the big journey, taught us some things. And one thing that we really internalized was about islands. Islands are incredibly special places where people. My conclusion is that the human ape is a smart ape, but we're still not that bright. We have the ability to kind of expand our brains to a certain amount of geographical area and a certain amount of people. Like I say, human beings do big things very, very poorly, but do little things very, very well. So massive systems we don't run well. We don't know how to run the climate, and that's why we're screwing it up. We can't conceptualize it. But on human levels, on basic small things, humans are great. But they need to know where those boundaries are. And islands give you an immediate boundary. And we saw this on every island that we were on, be it as small as some of the other Gulf islands or as big as Newfoundland, Cape Breton. There's something special that happens when people know where their home is. Like there's a sense of place, and community develops stronger and with more ease inside of those well-defined areas. And so we kind of decided that we wanted an island as our point. And then when we looked at kind of what for me, I looked at the climate models over the next 50 to 100 years, as we kind of, our goal is I don't think I'm bright enough to plan 7 generations forward, but I can understand my kids, I can understand their kids, and I can conceptualize that 3rd generation. And so everything that we do is kind of with that in mind. And so we look at what's the climate going to be in 100 years. Well, the models are saying there's going to be some significant changes. And so we needed to find a place which we felt had, at least if not anti-fragile, was definitely robust enough to withstand some of those oncoming changes. And so places with that, for me, the East Coast, I was more reticent to go there because I think the East Coast is going to see larger fluctuations, hurricanes, larger rainfall, larger drought, colder colds, and hotter hots.
Sea level rise too.
Sea level rise, well, it's everywhere. And so Quadra Island kind of hit that check mark as, you know, the infrastructure here is above any, you know, 100 years of sea level rise for sure. The western flows here give me more confidence in them, more stable, even we're having drier summers and wetter winters, but that's something you can design to mitigate against. So there was a bunch of things like that. And that just our experience here, we think it's gorgeous. And we learned to really like a lot of the people just in our short stay. And that's proven itself to be true. Like, we really enjoy the community here, and just finds a lot of really great people that we've been able to plug into the community very quickly.
Yep, and other things would be proximity to markets. And we did some woofing in Cape Breton, and they had a gorgeous farm that wasn't that expensive to buy. And of course, we love Cape Breton, but like, they just had no market for their produce because it's a depressed area and there's no big city center close by. Whereas here, there's lots of people. There's lots of people with disposable income. This is like retirement capital of Canada. So in terms of markets, and yeah, there's just a lot going on in the West Coast. I think we've met so many people that we've felt an affinity with, and that are doing lots of interesting things. And also price point. Like, we looked at other, like even Vancouver Island is just that much more expensive if you want to buy farmland than Quadra. We looked further north as well, and north of Campbell River, it just it was too remote. Quadra is amazing because we are living in a rural area, but we can basically walk or bike to the ferry. It's a 10-minute ferry, and we're downtown Campbell River. So if we need a city for shopping or activities, or we just need a bit of an urban experience, it's a walk and a 10-minute ferry right away.
And we have a moat.
Yeah, and most islands, it's not that easy to leave. So
Right.
It's pretty ideal here.
So you landed on Quadra, you ran somebody's Airbnb for close to a year, and then you bought farmland, and now you guys are getting ready to design the farm of your dreams. Can you talk a little bit about kind of where you're at there and what those next steps look like for you?
Some wise permaculture teacher of mine at one point mentioned that you should really observe for about a year on property, and
at least a year.
And we're finding that to be really true. Like, you know, for example, we've just had some serious rain events, you know, in the 10-inch kind of world, and realized one of the building sites that I thought would be a great building site, that even when I do the topographical using online tools, it looks like it should be high enough for a building site, and just realized that's under 10 inches of water in a major rain event. It's like, okay, well, that's a good observation. That not there. So understanding what that rain in the winter looks like, what that drought in the summer looks like, and realizing that there has to be some serious mitigation. With this property, we didn't know, but we got very lucky with the amount of water that is here. We had probably 100 days of drought this summer, but we still had near unlimited water in our 2 wells. So, you know, things that we could, we don't have to collect rainwater for our garden unless we want to avoid pumping it. That's another issue, but we know we don't have to spend, you know, $10,000 on that particular element to maintain a good growing during the summer. Yet if we wanted to get into animal production, we do have pasture land. If we want to get into that, we'd likely need to make sure that we are developing and designing ponds in a way. So I know that we're going to have to develop a pond system that holds the water for that element if we want to go in that direction. So, you know, things like that. We know where the water table comes right up to the surface, which means raised beds are a must, or where we can go without that, where we can plant apple trees, you know, all sorts of things like that you learn just by observing. But I've actually forgotten what the question was.
Yeah, and predator pressure, understanding that better. And a big thing for me has been just understanding what it's like to live with no sun for like weeks on end. And so what that means for how you should be spending your time in the winter when it's raining so hard. And yeah, there's a lot to learn.
Totally. So, I mean, it sounds like Mark's kind of been preparing for this since he was 16. And has it been a little bit overwhelming for you then, Jen?
Oh yeah, I've used that word quite a lot. I think, I mean, we moved to this property in May, and we put a garden in right away because we wanted to grow as much food as we could this year. And so we did a garden. I mean, it was mostly annuals. Like we just did what we could get up and going really quickly. And then we got goats and chickens, and we got 2 puppies and a kitten, and and then soon after had two goats that we were milking. The other ones weren't worth milking because they just didn't produce enough milk. Well, Mark has carpal tunnel, so he couldn't milk. And so I was doing all the milking twice a day, and I wasn't having fun doing the milking. So we ended up having a tragedy with our goats, and we lost both of our milking goats as well as a few of our other goats when they ate a toxic plant. And, I was thinking we'd get another milking goat right away, and we didn't, because I was just like, no, I'm just going to take a break from milking. And now I'm like, yeah, I don't want to take that on if it's just going to be me. So I think a big thing for us in terms of our design and our intention living on this land, which is 40 acres, is that we don't want to be here just us farming, or us and, a few woofers or maybe an employee once in a while. We want to create a community on this piece of land so that we are working together, and so sharing the labor, having the ability to leave because other people can take care of the farm, but probably most importantly, having community right here on our land and living in community. So we haven't quite figured out what that looks like yet, and we do want to be cautious because
we've realized that our life, we've made some correct choices. Like for me, saving X many percent every year since I was 16 to be able to build up an essay, but we've made choices that some just by luck has allowed us to get a hold of a piece of property this big. And we know there are people with a lot more skill and a lot more even drive and passion than we have that don't have that ability to access land. And we really see that our luck, we'd like to be able to somehow develop an incubation style where those people with the youth and the energy and the drive and the knowledge and the passion, that we can bring them and give them that or work out a partnership that gets land access to people that just because of the prices of land can't have that land access, and that we develop a mutually beneficial relationship that that works towards food security here on Quadra, because it is not food secure. It needs to be, because we're right at the end of the distribution lines, and that's kind of been our focus. I've been giving talks on food security, and it's kind of what our new kind of drive is looking at our area and saying, how do we add that area, that robustness, how do we make it anti-fragile by building into a more of a food secure kind of area. And we see it very possible here, but it is not here yet.
Right.
Yeah. And well, I like to say that people who know how to farm can't afford land, and people who can afford land don't know how to farm. Like the fact that we can afford land is because we didn't farm for the last 20 years or whatever. We did something completely different. So being able to partner, and also with people with other skills, like having carpentry, building skills, is something you really need on a farm, and something that Mark has some skills in, but he's now missing half his thumb, so it's a bit more challenging than it was before. So there's a lot of skills that we need to really make this land productive and regenerative and help in that whole food security goal. So,
and I think that's just with the word regenerative. I think you mentioned sustainable, and I think we've come to the point where we realize that it's too late for sustainable. We need to work on regenerative, and everything you do has to be positive. If you're taking down a tree, you better be planting two. And so that's kind of been part of our design and a part of our thinking, and that's a pretty high bar to leap over. But that's definitely been a focus.
Cool. So you guys, I'm really excited to have you in the Adaptive Habitat Land Design Program, and we're going to be doing a kind of a midterm check-in with you guys to see where you're at. I wanted to get a sense of where you were starting, and then we'll do a follow-up at the end to see where your design is going to go. And it's wonderful to, I don't think, even though we've known each other for a while, I don't think I've ever kind of got the full arc. I've kind of pieced it together on my own, but it was wonderful to kind of get that full story arc, and you know, to understand where you've come from and where you've gone. And I'm really not, and I'm not saying that you guys are worried about yourself, but I'm not worried about your lack of carpentry or whatever it is that you guys think you have kind of holes in your knowledge or whatever, because very few people have the guts to be able to do a complete 180, which I can say you guys have completely done, and there's nothing you guys can't figure out as a team. So especially when you start looking at all the social resources you guys have around you.
mm-hmm.
So I wanted to thank you guys for taking the time to have this conversation, and we'll check in 3-4 weeks from now and kind of see where you're at with your design and some of the insights that you guys have had. Do you have any last words for folks?
Last words.
Well, I would say, I mean, a lot of people have said that similar things to me, Rob, about, you know, you're so brave, like, oh, or I like usually say, I would really love to do something like that, but my husband would never leave the city, or, oh, it's just too scary, the idea of leaving our jobs, or just, well, for us, we were too scared to stay. Like, when you look at what's happening, it's freaking like terrifying. And like leaving the city and leaving our friends and going on this journey was easy compared to like trying to figure out how to face the future and
well, you're facing the future, but you're facing it with a different strategy.
Yeah, but I think,
well, it was our old lives we couldn't have maintained just that treadmill, that was finding a way to make that lifestyle function forever was frightening. It was impossible. But
we both have had career changes, and we've lived in different places, so it's not like it was something completely new. But it is definitely a 180, and I can't say it was easy or is easy. It's hard, but I definitely encourage people not to let fear be a reason to not do this.
Yeah, and we just made, you know, people say, well, how did you do it? So we didn't even realize we'd done it, actually. It was just kind of one little step. You show up a permaculture course, and then you just, suddenly you're in a van driving across the country and then buying a farm. It was no major design. We kind of more or less let things happen, and this is where we ended up. Fantastic.
Thanks, guys. So if you guys found that useful and insightful and inspiring, please give us a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed to the channel and you want to be notified when more interviews like this go onto our channel, you can hit the subscribe button. And we'll be talking to Marc and Jen here in not too long. So stay tuned, and we'll see you guys all in the next video.